Graylog is on a mission to make threat detection and incident response easier, faster, and more affordable. They help cybersecurity teams reduce risk across attack surfaces with SIEM, log management, and API security solutions. Their newest offering, Graylog API Security, adds a new layer of defense by discovering rogue APIs, monitoring for threats from inside the perimeter, and providing detailed guided responses. Full fidelity capture of API requests and responses ensures you can perform complete investigations and meet regulatory requirements. Some popular and persistent API myths have almost become threats themselves. Go to securityweekly.com/Graylog and watch the video there to debunk the top 5 misconceptions surrounding API security. Are your security teams overwhelmed with nonstop alerts? Then say hello to SentinelOne's Purple AI, the world's most powerful generative AI security analyst, built to simplify and accelerate your SecOps. Purple AI is built on the most robust data lake in the market, enabling analysts to protect your organization at machine speed. With natural language queries, threat hunting quick starts, smart response recommendations, and auto-saving investigation notebooks. See Purple AI in action at securityweekly.com/SentinelOne.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Tyler Shields. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSA Conference 2024 Conference Pass. RSA Conference will take place May 6th to May 9th in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC24 and use the code 54USecWeekly. We hope to see you there. All right, now for the enterprise security news. So, first of all, Tyler, good to see you, buddy. I missed you on the first segment, and it's been a while.
It has been a while. How you doing, Matt? Great to see your smiling face again, buddy.
Yeah, well, I'm super stoked this week because I get to cover our own funding news from CyberSaint.
Yes, and I love that funding news because the people at CyberSaint are some of my favorite people.
Yes, I know you and Allie have known each other for a while. I think that's how I got introduced to Allison Furneaux, I believe, was you. So
definitely
yes,
definitely could be. They're just good people, and I love surrounding myself with great people. I'm at that stage in my career where it's like, let's just hang around with the Matts and the Pauls and the Adrians of the world, and do good stuff with fun people. So yeah, very excited for the team at CyberSaint. They raised $21 million to accelerate market expansion. It's story number 4 on our board, and I love that we're opening with that one.
Yeah, and I did it. I mean, obviously, it benefits me directly running product for them, and it was a great round for us. It gives us the capital and some of the things that we, as a startup, you need to keep going. And I told the team when we announced it internally on Tuesday, I said, "You guys know, right, that unless it's over 20 million, I don't cover it on the show." So I'm glad we were over 20 million.
19.5, and we don't talk about it, Matt. It's
nope.
Just that discount.
On this show we do, but when I do my show, Security Money, on a quarterly basis, I don't cover the ones under 20 million because there's too many, right?
Yeah, you'd be there all day. You'd be talking about the $2 million, $3 million, $6 million seeds all day.
All day, and I wouldn't get the rest of the stuff done on the show. So yes, so it's going to get covered here, and then I'm going to cover it again on my quarterly, so I get a double dip on this one. But
you deserve to double dip on it though, because you helped build it, right? You were involved in the building of the business to a degree, right? So you deserve a double dip on this, Matt.
Thank you. All right, there are 3 larger ones ahead of that though. So Nozomi Networks, industrial control solution. I've known them for a long time. Raising $100 million to probably keep their momentum going. Tenable's made some acquisitions in the space. We've seen some consolidation in ICS, but Nozomi's still separate as its own standalone company. So now they've raised a total of $250 million. So my guess, Tyler, IPO?
Man, I'll tell you what, buddy, I feel like IT/OT technology is the gift that keeps on giving. For over 15 years. I've been hearing 10 to 15 years. I've been hearing IT/OT security. It's the next big thing. And gosh, this is the situation of the slow boil that finally boiled, right? Typically you see the slow boils and they get to some point, you're like, gosh, I'm just tired of watching that pot get warmer and warmer. But this market seems to have flipped into high gear with what was it? Armis was an IT/OT security play for a while. You got Nozomi. You got a handful of Clarity. I think was also another one. Clarity was an
Clarity,
IT/OT player.
Dragos. Yeah.
Yeah, and they all seem to be making that leap like within the last year or two with these big rounds where they're finally hitting that slow boil. So yeah, interesting to see. That kind of money certainly does indicate either one of two things, and dumb investors, or enough money that you're on an IPO track, right? When you're pulling that kind of money, and my gut tells me this is not dumb investors anymore. The era of dumb investors in 2021 has, that ship has sailed. We're all smart about where we put our money these days, and so yeah, I mean, hey, this whole market stands a chance. I think this is an interesting, development.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, there's been some activity in this market. I mean, Tenable bought Indegy, so I mean, there's been some exits here. I just don't think with 250 million in acquisitions gets a little tougher now when you start thinking about the valuation of that money, which tells me I think this thing goes IPO at some point in the future. So
yeah, I mean, I can't imagine you're getting 250 at anything less than a billion,
no,
five, maybe two, maybe even three, right? You're
right,
definitely a unicorn at that point. So
agreed.
who buys you, right? There's always that outlier, right? I mean, Splunk
Yeah,
was however 30, 20, 30, whatever billion
28
dollar
billion, 28 billion. Yeah,
right?
I
And
got
that's
that news story is in here because they finally closed it.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Well, I
Um,
mean, that alone tells you there's always an appetite on the way up, right? There's always a big appetite for some of these things, but you're talking the difference between a dozen to 15 to 20 M&As a year to one, right? So are
right.
you going to be that one unicorn that gets swallowed up by a bigger player? Hey, it could be, but it could also very easily be Clarity. It could also very easily be, one of these other IT/OT big players that have taken in a few hundred million. So tough to know where it's going to go from here. And that's always the big bet, right? You see these ones taking these big funding rounds, and that's
Mhm.
such a massive bet. When do you get liquid on it, right? That's always the hard question. You could talk about
Well,
what
Big
is it,
ID's
Stripe and
next. Yeah, but I mean, Big ID's in a similar boat. The second story, right? They just raised another 60 million. They're 320 million in, valued for more than $1 billion. So you've got two of these back to back, right? That are now these billion dollar, these
yeah.
unicorn valuations now, Tyler. And again, when you've got 320 million in, you take another big round, like there has to be an IPO track here somewhere down the road.
Yeah, it's so tough. And I'm, without trying to jump around too bad on your order list of articles here, you can chuck Cato in that mix too. That's the
Yep.
one that's taken in so much money, right? It's like, oof. But they're much closer to IPO. But I mean, at one point, a while back, it was something like 6, 7 years, 8 years was the typical IPO run. It took you 7, 8 years to figure out whether you're going to IPO, and that number was 100 million, right? You hit 100 million in ARR, you're going to IPO. You're over $1 billion evaluation, you're going to IPO. That's pretty much the only way you're going to go at that point.
Yep.
Now it's like you need 300, and 3 billion has become the new IPO point, right? Until you're at 300 million of ARR and 3 billion evaluation, people are just sitting on it. And I was reading an article this morning. I think you'd appreciate this too, Matt. When you have a business that is a compounding growth business that builds on itself, that has a negative NRR, meaning it, for those that don't understand the term, meaning that you have a kind of a land expand methodology, and you land a deal and then you expand it over time and your deals grow. That's like, the old Warren Buffett compounding interest story, right? Like the
Mhm.
magic of compounding interest. That is the same story in business. And SaaS brought forth that compounding interest model to business. And basically, what happened is investors and founders realized, hey, wait a minute. Why should I IPO this thing now? If I wait another year, I'm getting this much more. If I wait another 2 years, I'm getting this much more. And, with the exception of the downturn in 2021, 22, that was true. And it's probably going to be true going forward. So now you're talking 10, 12 years before people get liquidity on these companies. So it's super interesting to watch. And I'm waiting for that dam to bust. It's got to break soon.
Mhm.
Got to.
We hope so. I
Well,
need some.
Reddit went out today.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
went out today. I think 34 a share was their number.
The
But
problem,
obviously not a cyber company, but,
right?
you know,
I need them for
hopefully.
the index because now that Splunk's out, I'm at 24. There is no 25th pure play company to put into my index, Tyler. Like
Ooh,
because nobody else hits the threshold. So we've got a couple sitting out there that are well below the $1 billion threshold, which is the original threshold I put in for the index. And
Yeah.
there's nobody there right now.
Yeah, man. And I think we're in an era where anybody that would stand the chance of getting there will likely get gobbled up before they IPO. And there's a small number that are on that IPO brink. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Yes, it is. Well, we'll talk about Cato in a minute. Let's see what else we have. JP Morgan Growth leads a $39 million investment in iSecurity. I don't know I think are they UK based? Oh, it's
They're European company,
European
yeah.
based.
So
Okay.
high-end protection in one simple package. I think it's similar to maybe a Blue Myra or one of these guys in the US, but European based. I don't know that for sure, right? This is just taking a quick peek at their website, which I love is i.security. Super simple URL to remember. And when you put a tagline on your website that literally says complete protection at affordable prices, you're playing the commodity game, right? This is not a we're going to charge you billions of dollars and $100 million a year to put in our super crazy tech. But assuming I've got the correct company here, it's a high end protection in one simple package, enterprise level protection at non-enterprise level prices.
I don't know what that means. Oh, don't get me started on marketing messages.
But they got 39 million, so they probably got a bunch of revenue.
They must have revenue.
Yeah, you would think so. You would hope so. Fingers crossed.
BotGuard raises $13 million to protect against harmful web traffic. Is there still a bot market? I mean, there is, but I mean, we've seen so many different solutions come and go. Like, this is another European one, I think, too.
Yeah, you're touching right on a heart of research I'm actually involved in right now because I'm full time as a VP of product marketing at Traceable, and I think we just got done. I didn't actually listen to the entire previous recording that we just did, but we just got done talking to another API security vendor as well. And the bot market is an interesting thing because the TAM on that market is massive. It's a 30 billion plus market, but when you include bots, bot mitigation, fraud, the bigger fraud problem. But I'm not entirely convinced how long it stays an isolated market. And this is the problem I'm having with all of cyber right now. API security, how long does it maintain as an isolated market? Bot security, how long does it maintain as an isolated market? I think the reality, and we'll talk about this later in the show with one of your other stories there, but I think the reality is there's a few centers of gravity that are pulling large data sets towards them. And I think bot protection goes along with API protection because those are kind of directly coupled together, right? Bot and fraud mitigation consists of two things: client side stuff that's in the browser, and API and server side kind of monitoring telemetry. You pull that stuff together and you see behavioral analytics that come over the top of that. And so when you're looking at that market as a whole, it makes sense to be connected to CDN WAF, traditional WAF, infrastructure protection plays. So, Akamai, F5, Palo, these are going to be natural centers of gravity for these markets to be acquired into or potentially run over by some of these bigger players. So to directly actually answer your question, I think, there is a very strong market for the bot fraud and mitigation play in the near term. It's a question of how long.
Yeah, because you also have the CDNs like Fastly and Cloudflare, also another logical point to collapse some of this.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's definitely a triangulation happening in the API security space between the CDN vendors, the traditional CNAP vendors, the WAP vendors. Like all of these markets are definitely circling some kind of center of gravity. Something's pulling them to a center. So it's going to be fun to watch that one too.
Interesting. Yeah. Let's see. Next up, emerges from stealth with frictionless data model governance platform, secures $6.25 million. My assumption this is going to go. This is one of these AI plays, right? I'm seeing a lot of news around AI governance plays, right? Because everybody's trying to figure out, which models am I going to use and all this other stuff. So I'm not surprised that somebody's coming out of stealth to do some AI governance work.
Yeah, there's going to be a bunch of them popping out of stealth or already out of stealth. AI security or Gen AI security comes in, let's call it three forms. There's the form where you use generative AI to create security tools, right? That's the form that's popping out first. That's the CrowdStrike story, the Zscaler Avalor story that we'll get to a little bit later. That's the center of gravity story that I'm always talking about, right? But then if you say, okay, well, how do we secure AI or Gen AI itself? There's kind of two storylines there as well. Storyline one is the potential attack vectors of poisoning the training, convincing and jumping past guardrails, prompt injection against a AI or a generalized AI algorithm, kind of attacking the AI directly. And then there's another set of offerings, I think, that will end up being the lower hanging fruit that enterprises will likely deploy fast, is some kind of protection where your applications and things you're developing or building are making calls to AI backends or AI as a service, and you secure those comms patterns, right? So, for example, I write a piece of code that uses a AI chatbot on the back end, and it makes a bunch of API calls to that system. Well, we can intercept those API calls, whether that's a SaaS AI or whether it's an on-prem open source one I've built. Those are still comms patterns that are pretty straightforward to intercept. So, for lack of a better term, and I hate the term, you could almost call it like an API or an AI WAF that sits there and looks for wherever your apps are trying to consume AI content and secure the input and potentially sanitize the output in that environment. So, this one popping out, I don't know what you know, what I know, what you know. I don't know what you know specifically does, which of those kind of models, but it's going to be interesting. I think that's my generalized take on AI. It's going to fall into those three.
It looks
three
like
models.
the data model itself. So it's probably more the poisoning types of attacks. That's my guess.
And I'll be honest with you, I think that's the last one to be successful. Because that's like, let's really truly consider the attack vectors of the three models that I talked about, right? Like, I think the first one is, hey, I'm CrowdStrike and I now enabled my product with Gen AI capabilities and analysis of data internally. That's the co-pilots. That's the CrowdStrike. That's number one. That's happening right now. That's already rolling out.
Yep.
The second one I think is I've built an app that uses AI. That's the second of the low hanging fruit comparatively. The one that we're talking about here, like, what's the real attack vectors in that? Like, how do people actually, do a whole lot of poisoning or prompt injection techniques when you have an app that front ends some kind of AI? It's a lot harder. It's not like directly hitting Chat GPT, right? Where it's straightforward. So I think this is the last one to fall down for me.
Interesting. Good analysis. Steady Bits raises $6 million. They're German based. Really, it looks like a platform to build more reliable software through the concepts of chaos engineering. So you take some of the Google disciplines and some of the chaos engineering stuff and put it in a platform.
Yeah. I struggle a bit right now. I'm not excited about anything in the app dev space.
No? Yeah. I mean, it was so, for a while there was so much innovation happening in that space, Tyler.
Yeah.
Right. And now it's just kind of like not really seeing much. I mean, Wiz is killing it from a CSPM cloud side. You see those guys, you see the Orcas doing well. But you're not seeing anything like new and innovative really coming into the space. It's like, ooh, I got to have that.
Yeah, that's my struggle bus right there, Matt. You nailed it. It's like, I want something unique and innovative. And I mean, look, I'm not sitting here saying I know everything there is about AppSec, and that's probably part of the problem, is that there's probably innovation being done in niche corners of AppSec that I don't understand yet, right? Like, maybe I'm not as good on Kubernetes or some other, more modern development model than I've traditionally used in the past. And okay, maybe something like that does bubble to the surface, and maybe this is just my getting old, but I'm not seeing a lot in the AppSec space from a pitch vantage point that I'm like, wow, totally cool and unique. The closest I get to that is like Gen AI, automated code remediation modeling, things like that. but even that, I'm hearing a fair amount of that from multiple places. So I
Hmm.
don't think that innovates in its own company. I think that innovates within a bigger player like a Veracode or some other traditional AppSec player, a Sneak,
Yeah.
a Wiz,
Synopsis, whatever. Yeah.
Synopsys, sure.
Yeah. Right. They have larger portfolios in this space.
Yep.
Yeah. Mindflow, 5 million euro. One of the founders is the co-founder at Datadog, but Mindflow aims at empowering any IT practitioner to leverage AI and automation so that they never have to work on mundane, boring tasks ever again. So this is actually a way to take workloads and delegate them to these AI. I'll call it they call it an agent. I almost think it's a bot. So you
Yeah,
don't have
this
to do
this
the boring tests. Yes.
yeah, this one's neat, right? Like I also have said in the past that like I think one of the first directly applicable using AI to make security better scenarios is going to be the AI SOC, right?
Yep.
Which in some essence is this is more of a little bit of a more niched focused version of that, right? And um, focused on improving, I guess, secondary areas other than the SOC. But like, if you look at the recent funding rounds across the board, one of the things that I'm seeing in a consistent way is kind of this automation of tier one SOC, right? Because tier one SOC is programmatic.
Yep.
The concept of like a tier one SOC analyst is, hey, I'm just out of college or I got a few years of experience and I'm trying to learn the field. So I get playbooks. I get hit with 10, 20, 30 playbooks. When X happens, do Y, right?
Mm-hmm.
And research Z and then talk to so-and-so who can make a call, right? That is fully automatable with current Gen AI algorithm levels, right? So that to me is the first pass. And then over time, I think we'll see as the AI gets better and better that we'll continue to move up that stack as the analysts level up and do higher order work. We will begin to see the AI start encroaching and more and smarter and smarter and smarter. So, yeah, I mean, good for the Mindflow folks. The 5 million in seed funding. We'll see. Most of these guys are struggle. They hit the struggle bus, but hopefully, getting it now might be a good timing win for them.
Yeah. Another AI, Redcoat AI, also takes a funding round. Only 4.24 million in funding.
We're touching small ones, man.
I know
Small
a couple
ones.
small ones, but it's all these AI ones, right? It's like you just seen this, all these guys coming out, and everybody's going to go,
Yeah.
build their next AI platform. This one looks like it's interesting. It describes Redcoat AI's platform offers a dual approach to cybersecurity: an on-demand red teaming service for social engineering attacks and mobile defense that extends comprehensive protection across SMS, WhatsApp, and the other messaging platforms. Now, if somebody can fix smishing for me, and it happens to be an AI solution that does it, then great. Because as I hear from a lot of my CISO friends, smishing's the one attack they feel they can't do anything about. And so if that's what this is trying to do, great. I just, I don't know. You throw AI in there and you never know what it's actually going to do.
Hey, AI gets you 4 million right off the top. So this is probably worth $250,000 in a general investment model. No, I'm just kidding. They got 4.25. So we'll say that four was it because they were AI, but this one's cool. I've been talking about this with Adrian and the team quite a bit recently. Is this one feels to me like, hey, we got a bunch of folks that figured out how to use AI to do offensive things like automate deep fakes and automate human interactions and automate social engineering. Let's just take that tech and flip it, right? I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these guys in this particular company did offensive research beforehand, and I have not researched them at all. I could be 100% off base here, but I'm shooting in the dark, and I'm going to guess they're a little bit more offensive minded, and then said, hey, what we have here could also be used in a defensive approach. I think the OG pen testers back 20 years ago when I was offensive, all of a sudden, and I wish I was smart enough to have thought of this, that people are like, hey, if we take the offensive stuff that we're doing in hacking and creating new offensive techniques and flip it on its head, we got companies, right? So I think this is interesting to me because this is where actual attacks occur every day. Literally every day, right? Like back to the point about that last one where it's about AI security and training and poisoning training models. And Yeah, but the chances of that happening are so slim. The chances of you getting a social engineering attack or a phishing attack are massive. I got one this afternoon. I got an email this afternoon attempting to phish me. So I think this actually stands to have a better chance of doing well as a business than some of the other AI approaches.
Yeah, agreed. Because it's in the wheelhouse of what Gen
Yep.
AI is currently really good at.
Yep. Yeah, and add to that, like at the end of the day, what's been the biggest attack result? And because I don't call this particular thing an attack, but in the last couple of years, the biggest attack result has been ransomware, and the bulk of those are because somebody got phished, somebody got some weird auth bypass or got a compromised laptop, and it's not because somebody had a 0-day or in some case it is, but more often than not, it's the low hanging fruit.
Yeah. It's the social engineering attack, which is why a lot of people struggle with smishing because they don't own the phones. There's not much they can do. But if you can put a protection on it like this that also can look for these types of attacks and prevent them from happening, I mean, trust me, there's a number of CISOs out there to be really, really happy to solve the smishing problem. Because
Yeah, I do wonder about the mobile side of this. So they're an on-demand red teaming service for social engineered attacks mobile defense that extends comprehensive protection across SMS, WhatsApp, and other messaging platforms.
yeah.
And one thing that, like, if they start to play in the on endpoint mobile security side, I don't think they win. But if they chose their words pretty cleverly here to not be connected to a mobile security offering, because that market is not a great market. But if they can protect messaging platforms, that's very valuable because a lot of your financial institutions, banks, and insurance companies are regulated to monitor that stuff too. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that they're potentially doing here. They just have some landmines to avoid, I think.
Yeah. All right, let's get to your foundation story. Zscaler acquires Avalor for a reported $350 million.
Yeah. Congratulations to the Avalor team. That gosh, I don't even know where to begin on this story because I'm intimate with this story. I talked to them early on about maybe joining them for a while.
Who, the Avalor?
Yeah.
Oh.
We never came to terms on how we wanted to do that, and so Michelle McLean ended up taking the CMO role there, and she absolutely killed it with them. They've done a phenomenal job. But really, what they've created at Avalor is essentially, they call it the data fabric for cybersecurity. We collect all the things, right? We collect and analyze all the things in whatever format you need to analyze the things, right? And I think when we're talking about, and I've publicly said this a million times on this show over the last year and a half, 2 years, when we're talking about bigger, longer term strategies for like Palo Alto and building these broad platforms, the company that will win is the company that has the largest data set and then can apply smartest algorithms on the largest data set. That provides the best security output. Palo's in a good spot. CrowdStrike's in a great spot. And Zscaler, being one of the 3 or 4 most important cyber companies that are publicly traded, went, oh no, we don't have that. We don't have that underpinning. We got our data that we collect on the network, but we don't have asset data. We don't have app data. We don't have cloud-centric data. We don't have all these other data sources that we can analyze. And so they picked up Avalor. And I think it's a brilliant play that makes them viable in this potential race we're seeing between CrowdStrike, Palo, now Zscaler, SentinelOne, and potentially Cisco, Splunk with their combo platter.
Well, Tenable's doing it with Tenable One. That's the whole story behind Tenable One also.
It's so funny. I was talking to one of the high up strategy and corp dev guys at Tenable 4 years ago. And I said, this is the fundamental platform that every big player will have to build upon because it's what Jupiter One does, right? When I was building Jupiter One, it's fundamentally what Jupiter One does as well, which, if there's another company out there that needs to acquire into this space, Jupiter One's a perfect target. Hint, hint, go buy them. But, and I was talking to my friend over there at Tenable, and I was like, this is the core. And he's like, yeah, Tyler, you guys were just 18 months too early to it. Like this is still coming. And now all the big guns are taking shots at it. It's really impressive. And this, I think this is one of the reasons why micro investing scares me right now in cyber is because how do you play against a company that has all the things and can analyze all the things? How do you create a differentiation or a technical moat, it's very, very difficult.
I agree with you. I mean, as these companies continue to grow their portfolios, because all these companies have been on acquisition sprees and pulling in other types of data sets. I mean, I even hear that Tenable is going to bring in Qualys data and Rapid7 data into this platform, right? It doesn't matter. They
That's
want the
right.
data so they can analyze the data across all the other data that they already have, right? And so
Yeah,
I think you're going to see more of this.
I haven't written this research up yet, but I spoke to the folks at, oh goodness, it was either CrowdStrike or something. I think it's SentinelOne. I don't want to screw up and say the wrong one, but I think I was talking to the folks at SentinelOne. I got to go back and check my notes. And basically they're like, yeah, we take in anything. Our central platform will literally take in asset data, IP data, cloud-centric data, vuln information. We'll enrich that, cross-connect it all. We use, and there's something now called the OCSF, I think it's called, which is it's an open format for this massive data collection problem for cybersecurity data beyond just vulnerabilities. And SentinelOne's saying, hey, yeah, we're going to take it all into our base system. We don't care where it comes from. You buy this base system, we'll pull it from any tool, security tools, public tools, private tools, open source tools, and then we're going to normalize it to a public format that everybody can then pull out of. And if all of the big guns take a fundamental similar approach to the openness of that platform, how do you compete as a small company? How do you even fit into that model? Because they're essentially commoditizing the data set that you're analyzing.
Yeah. It's a little, when I was at Living Security, we were integrating with lots of products to pull the data in. One of the pushbacks, Tyler, is that companies don't necessarily want you pulling that data out either, right? And centralizing it. And so the strategy here at CyberSaint is put it in your data lake. We'll just query against it, right? And so I'm waiting to see how this game plays out. Like, who really can build the Uber hosted data lake and who is going to be forced to integrate with the client's data lakes. Do you know what I mean?
I 100% understand what you're getting at. And there's actually two fundamental questions that will determine how that's going to work out. I do think it'll be stored. And the reason why I think it'll be stored is because of a potential for speed difficulties. The larger the data set gets, when you're doing an AI analysis of a large data set, you need access to the entire data set. And so how do you do that in a querying model? We're not trying to look up, hey, how does this connect to this? We're trying to say, holistically, in our entire data set of every single event and asset that we have in our universe of IBM, is there any vulnerabilities? Like, that's the level of question you have. So you can't really do a query model. It's not fast enough. You can't get that holistic view. So I do think it'll end up being on-prem. Now, here's the tricky part. And this I wrote a piece about called The Crush of the Margin. Here comes the margin crush. Every piece of data you store is, especially in a SaaS platform, hits the cost of good sold for that SaaS platform. So if I'm a company like Zscaler with Avalor and I'm trying to collect all the things, the more things I collect, the more I have to charge to the customer, because I got to store all that and I got to read and write that and analyze all that. And if I can't equivocally raise my price astronomically, the only other thing that happens is the margin gets squeezed. And I think you're going to see cyber company margins go from 80, 90% in the traditional SaaS space to 50% being the acceptable norm, or 60% being the acceptable norm. And that's going to completely change how venture capital works. That's going to change how investment works. That's going to change how the public markets value these companies.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of things that come, and that's just the cyber story. You can apply that same story to AI analysis of large data sets in any market. So I think this is like a bigger thing, and trying to understand how the markets are going to absorb that fundamental change in how the businesses work. That's going to be fun to watch. But I do think it ends up having to be either SaaS stored with low margins or on-prem stored where you can say, you can, as a company, defray that cost to your buyer. You can store as much as you want, buyer. We don't care because it doesn't hit our COGS, and you're going to pay for your data set.
Yep. And I think some companies want control of that data and are more prone to leaving that data where it is, instead of taking that data and sending it up to Zscaler's cloud or SentinelOne's cloud or whoever's cloud, right?
Yeah.
I just see that friction today, and I don't think it goes away. And then
Yep.
you have to figure out how to interact with those large data sets that are not, that you don't own.
Yeah. And here's the best thing about it. And that is exactly why Sentinel-1 is normalizing it to that normal standard, because that way they can commoditize that for everybody. We don't care. It's normalized. You can keep this in a local data store of your choice. I think we're going to see a movement actually in the next 2 to 3 years away from cloud data storage to on-prem storage for this exact reason, because the SaaS companies don't want to store it because the margin crush, and they're going to give people actual discounts to go ahead and store it themselves. And you're not going to want to store it in the cloud because of the cost to store it in the cloud, and you're going to start actually bringing stuff back on-prem.
Well, then our strategy works because that's what we support today. So that's good.
Well, there you go.
You just validated our data lake strategy.
to quote the A team, I love it when a plan comes together.
Yes. So it's official. Splunk is now owned by Cisco. They just finished closing the $28 billion acquisition, which means the Security Weekly 25 index is now down to 24, as I talked about earlier.
That's right.
Here's the question on this one. How does Cisco not screw this up?
I love how you phrased that question, man.
I mean, come on. If there's one exception, they left Duo alone, right? They left Duo alone, and Duo's done pretty well under the Cisco umbrella. You can't say that about pretty much any other solution, acquisition, can you? So do you just leave Splunk alone and let it do its thing? And I don't, like, what happens now? Like, if I'm a Splunk customer and I look at the track record, I'm like, am I staying with Splunk? Like,
here's the interesting thing with this one. This is their attempt to remain relevant in that bigger picture race I was talking about. Right?
Yes.
This is their attempt to say, hey, we have a massive data storage capability too. I just don't see how they can possibly make the engineering connections that are going to be required to make this story work for them. They are so late to the game, B, such a massive technology space. I think that what ends up happening is Cisco becomes what IBM and HP were 6-7 years ago. Yeah, it's, you can buy that stuff and you can buy a big suite, but it's certainly not the most cutting edge. It's not going to give you the best features, and they're just going to, I think they become a third or fourth place in the race, maybe even fifth place in the race. I just don't see how they can make this work. It's just like jamming together two things that should go together with perfection, and just taking them and just squishing and having it fly between your fingers in every direction. Like, I just don't see how it could possibly work.
Yeah. And if I'm a Splunk customer, well, I mean, look, most Splunk customers were looking for an alternative anyways, because of the costs associated with Splunk. Back to the storage conversation, right? Like, Splunk was expensive, right? And it is expensive. And so you had a lot of startups and a lot of innovation looking at ways to offset the cost and storage of what was going in Splunk. So Splunk was already in this interesting dilemma, I think, anyways, because so many people were coming after them from a cost perspective, right? Now you marry that with this acquisition that could slow down some innovation because Cisco's trying to figure out how to pull all these pieces together. I just see this potential for mass exodus off Splunk's platform.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I think that's already the thing. It's I don't see how they remain relevant. I think the cost story is some short-term relief going to some of these other players willing to offer massive discounts. So like Palo, one of the big things they talked about, that Nirzak talked about when he announced his platformization story, is to get people off of competing products, again, to make sure that the compounding flywheel remains powerful. He's offering 12 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months free. You dump your product, you switch to us, we'll give you to the life of your contract free, and then you'll switch over and we'll charge you at that point. Now, if you're Splunk, though, you're toast, because like everybody's just gonna be like, yeah, well, I just moved my data over there. And when I was at JupiterOne, for example, you had essentially, people would always say, well, aren't you the same as Splunk? And I'd always tell them, Splunk does event data, JupiterOne does asset data. And actually, Splunk was a minority investor in JupiterOne to pull that, to work together to get that dual set of information together. And I do think Splunk plus an asset management style tech like Jupiter One or Exonius really does fit well together. And maybe that's what Cisco does. Maybe Cisco buys Exonius or Jupiter One so that they can have the asset data, the event data, and then their own vulnerability discovery data. And maybe that's how they glue it together. And then it just comes down to the fact that they just can't execute. They're going to fail on execution, but they could try. They could try.
Right. Yeah. Because everybody's like, why don't you integrate with Splunk? Because it's event data. It's not in a format that I can use, right? Or that most companies can use when you're doing things like compliance and risk management, some of the other things, right? Like the raw data. And plus, Splunk is really good at getting data in. They're horrible at getting data out. So
yeah, well, they are one of the founding. They're one of the founding members of the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, the OCSF that I was mentioning that SentinelOne and others are developing to. Splunk was one of the founders of that. They're involved in that. They want that to become a reality as well. And so again, I just think they just have poor execution against the vision, right? And that vision is to use the OCSF to normalize that data and make it transferable, make the customer have the ability to put it in the cloud, put it on-prem, move it around, give it to these people, duplicate it here, duplicate it there, because it's all the same format. I think if we could achieve that, they could stand a chance, but I don't think that's just...
Yeah. I mean, that would help me tremendously, having all that data normalized in a format I can reuse. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It would help any of those companies we've mentioned.
Yep. So Airbus calls off its acquisition of Atos Cybersecurity. So this is interesting, right? They announced a few weeks ago that they were going to acquire Atos, and now they're like, nope, called it off. And there's no explanation why. All I know is that shares have dropped substantially, but you typically don't announce an acquisition and then announce that you're not doing it. Like usually once you make the announcement, you're pretty much going down that path, don't you?
You would think so. Sometimes you get leaking problems where things leak out. But usually when I've seen things die like this on deals, it's because something ugly was discovered in one direction or the other, right? Somebody went in and went, ew, no, during the due diligence process, right? And so, and it could be either way. I'm not saying either of these companies is doing something bad because it's impossible to know. Nobody's really saying, but typically it's like, oh my gosh, your metrics were wrong, or the way you measure is incorrect, or your product doesn't actually work, or you have no capability to deliver what you think you do. And you can't necessarily get there until you're in the due diligence phases. And then once you get there, the landmines get exposed, right? The warts become real. And that's usually what has happened when something like this dies on the vine very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either that or sometimes I've also seen it where regulatory crushes it, right? Like they get word back. Yeah, they get word back from a preliminary like European antitrust kind of thing. And they're like, hey, we're going to kill this if you don't kill it yourselves.
Yeah, but in this particular case, you think about this. This is Airbus, an airplane manufacturer, buying a cybersecurity firm to really go after aviation security is kind of the original thought process on this acquisition. Normally, it would be like if Airbus and Boeing tried to get together, the EU regulators would be like, oh, no. I just don't know that was it. And usually you find the ugly stuff in due diligence prior to announcing an acquisition. So it's just weird news to me that I don't see this often, right? Like if you say you're acquiring a company, like you're doing it. It's just how long does it take to close? Like in the case of Cisco and Splunk or any acquisition that's happened, right? This one just weird. And maybe it was a regulator.
It just depends on the diligence process and how deep into the different cuts you got before you announced, and then how much more diligence you did post announce. Like, from announce and signatures to close could be 90, or more 180 days long, where you're still deep diving all that information. It just depends on the structure of the deal. Now, I do think it was a good fit. And I know audience who knows me is probably shocked when I say this, but look, Airbus has all sorts of technical problems. They're basically flying computers. Many, many computers are in an airplane, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're building essentially flying computers, much like Teslas are driving computers. But what really seems interesting is if they could have monetized security services towards airports and towards third-party partners. And maybe that is where then you get to the antitrust stuff where it's like, oh, every single one of our supply chain must now undergo a cybersecurity assessment and we're going to charge for it. And we own the company that charges for it. Maybe that blows it up. But again, I'm just speculating, right? Just who knows? These things could blow up for just people getting mad at each other. I've seen them blow up because somebody didn't like a word somebody said. So you never know.
Never know. All right. Cato Networks hires Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Chase, and Barclays to lead preparations for stock market flotation that could come by early 2025. IPO market heating up a little bit, maybe?
Oh gosh, please heat up. Please give us liquidity. Every investor in cyber is sitting here going, "Oh my God, please, yes, we need the liquidity on this." Because yeah, I have no stake in Cato, but if Cato goes public and does well, you'll see the sneaks of the world go, and you'll see the Axonius of the world go, and you'll see the dominoes start to fall as the market continues to climb. And then what happens with all that extra invested capital? M&A for the rest of the world, right? We get bought up a little bit better. All the mid and smaller companies will get bought up into the bigger ones. And I think I was just talking to some money folks today. I think we're at the bottom of a really nice run in cybersecurity in the next 3 to 5 years. If you can stomach the ups and downs, because they're going to be violent swings in it, 3 to 5 years is a great holding pattern for cybersecurity companies right now. And that's both in the private and the public market.
Yeah, I think we are pretty much at the bottom, right? I think we're flattening out on inflation, which means we're kind of capping there, which means we'll get some rate cuts later this year. I don't know that we'll get 3. We might only get 2, and everybody's counting on 3. But anything that loosens up money will be a big win as we get into the second half of the year, which I think is when it comes, Tyler. And then that starts to fuel a recovery probably after the election into early 25. So the timing's right for this to kind of build that momentum, because I think there is a great opportunity for the markets to be in much better shape early 25 and beyond, which kind of starts the upswing again into the exits. Yes.
Yeah. Cato's been around since, I believe, 2015. So that's going to be what, 9 years from Series A to IPO. So they've been around maybe a little bit longer than that. I've got them back to October 27, 2015 for their Series A. But 9 years, man, that's right on target, right? What are they saying? 9 to 11 is kind of the window. They got there a little bit faster than others. The most recent round, September 19th of 2023. So about 10 months ago, 10 months ago, $238 million venture round from Lightspeed. And yeah, that seems like it might have been well timed, really right before the run up started. I think they did a great job from the investment timing on that. 13 different investors, including SoftBank, Lightspeed. It's the big of the big. They put a lot of money behind this one, and I think it's going to have an interesting ride when it gets out there.
Yeah, let's hope so for all of our sakes. Let's see. We've got a partnership opportunity as soon as my browser stops causing me grief today. Let's see. Logarithm and SOC Prime announced partnership to accelerate threat detection and hunting. Logarithm, boy, haven't heard that name in a while.
Yeah. I don't know much about SOC Prime. That's why I'm kind of trying to get caught up on this one with. I'm not sure. It says here they arm customers with powerful combination of threat hunting, analytics, automation. Is this a market that also gets snapped up and beat up by the big story we covered earlier, right? The Avalor Zscaler style story. Because what is threat hunting, right? Threat hunting is looking through large quantities of data for indicators of compromise and making holistic data analysis correlations to determine if you've been hacked or if you have indicators of a hack. Well, more data, better analysis. Like, hey, that kind of fits in the bigger picture. And I think maybe this is the Cisco SIM story, Cisco Splunk story, is to be a little bit better at this. And maybe it's the Palo story. It's probably the Palo story. It's probably the Sentinel story.
Yeah, but at this point, is logarithm too late to this game? Right? If you
Logarithm's
think,
similar to Splunk, right? I mean,
yes,
they're a SIM.
yeah, they're a sim, but an old sim, I think Thoma Bravo owns them. I think Thoma Bravo is the one that bought them. Might have switched hands, but you haven't seen much innovation from these guys. It's not even an acquisition. It's just a partnership. It's like, hey, let's
Yeah.
co-sell together. Like, is that really going to move the needle when you think about the Zscaler Avalor discussion, Splunk going to Cisco? Like, does a partnership even have a chance, knowing where these players are starting to focus on these large data sets?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm a sim and I'm not figuring out how to expand that portfolio, like, I don't know that a partnership by itself is going to do it.
So this is where I kind of spin back my corp dev hat when I used to be a corporate development person for a couple different companies. Uh, Partnerships come in a couple different flavors. They come in
Mhm.
meaningful, meet in the market partnerships where we sell things together, and it's usually on the GTM side. They come in integration partnerships where we actually integrate and share data back and forth, typically because either customers demand it or we have a go to market route where we can monetize it. And there's the third flavor, which is, I would say, the vast majority of partnerships, we call them Barney partnerships. I love you, you love me, and that's literally the extent of the show, right?
Mhm.
It's a big purple dinosaur hugging you, and that's it. There's no more meat on that bone. However, the reason you do those is you do those to get close to a potential acquisition or merger target. You get to get closer on the tech. You get to start talking about technical integrations. You get to start talking about GTMs, and you say, "Hey, this is working out. We're dating, and this is working out a little better. Let's get married." I'm not saying at all that that's what's happening here, but that seems to be the cleanest fit for why this combination might work. Is like, hey, Toma's got logarithm. If Toma has, I'm not sure you said Toma has logarithm. Toma could pick up Sock Prime and merge them together, right? And this is just the first dating sequence of the Barney relationship.
Yep. Yeah. I have to see if Toma Bravo still has them, but I think they do.
Yeah, we'd have to look that up.
Yeah, we'll have to look it up. I'll search it in a second. Last story I pulled in here: quantum computing is paved with gold. Really? It's interesting way to describe it. I think quantum computing is interesting. I think there's a lot of work yet to do in this, and it's going to be disruptive when it comes. But how close are we? Now, I had Dave DeWalt on my show on Monday, and quantum came up a little bit. And,
Okay.
he sees, 3 to 5 years ish. We start getting a little more serious about this. I think we're still a little early. I don't know. What do you think?
I think I'm an idiot. And what I mean by that, I'm gonna lay it out. Adrian loves it. He loves talking quantum computing, right? He loves talking about, he thinks, he's not sure when, but he thinks it's really cool. I still don't get it. And one thing I've learned in the last 5 to 7 years is when I don't get it, it's because something's broken there in the
Mm.
model. Right. So crypto at its height, I'm like, I don't get it. How are people actively using crypto to provide value somewhere? Fast forward, crash. Mobile security. I was hyping the heck out of that 10 plus years ago. You got to get mobile security, but nobody was finding value from it. I didn't get where the value truly came from when I really thought about it. Crash, mobile security market kind of delineated or disintegrated around you. I don't get quantum. So it's one of two things. Either I'm stupid and can't figure it out, highly probable. There's a great chance I just don't get it. But so far, I'm 3 for 3 in the last 5 to 7 years that when I don't get it, it's because there's no meat on that bone and it's about to fall apart. I'm not impressed with quantum yet. I would love to have somebody much smarter in quantum truly educate me on that topic.
Great analysis, because I don't fully understand it either. And then the journey is paved with gold. Well, what does that mean? It's going to take gold to, I mean, these things are going to be expensive, right? Like this, I don't know how you get these things to market and at scale without these things just costing a fortune. Like, how many people could actually afford to buy one of these things when they're available,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's the kind of the part. Now, yeah, what they could potentially do is scary, right? Because they could break encryption and do all kinds of things. But again, until I see it, like, is it even
Yep.
real?
So I'll give you another analogy. I turned down an investment in OpenAI. at a $10 billion valuation. I was like, no, AI is the next crypto. I don't understand it, right? Fast forward roughly 3 months from the time I turned it down, ChatGPT came out. I went, oh my God, I understand it. The minute I saw it, I understood it. And I'm like, okay, this is real because there's value being generated. I can use it. I can touch it. I can see output. It makes my life somehow better. And that's the instant I knew I had screwed up on that investment, that I had passed on a real winner, right? Was the moment I saw ChatGPT. I have yet to have that type of value discovery around quantum in any way. And until I have that, I struggle to find meaning around it.
Yep. Quick factoid, Tomo Bravo did buy Logarithm in 2018. I think they are still the current owners, by the way.
Awesome.
Tyler, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. Adrian will be back next week on Enterprise Security Weekly.